Hello there, it's Jay here from Jay's Vintage Junk, and today we're finally back on with the little Nixie Clock project, because this really needs to go back to its owner. First of all, I will apologise that there was no video last week, and I apologise to the owner of this because I was hoping to get this back to him sooner than this, but I was taken rather ill last week, so I didn't really get a chance to do anything. It's one of the problems with having chronic fatigue, that sometimes it can just rear its ugly head and kind of knock you out for a while. But anyway, I'm feeling a little better now, so I'm back on with getting this finished off and back to the chap. And what we've got in this box, we should have a brand new Nixie tube to replace that faulty one. So I haven't opened this yet, so hopefully this has arrived in one piece. This was from a quite a trusted source, so I'm not expecting there to be any problems with this. This should be a nice. Let's see what we've got in here. I'll try and make sure these don't go all over the floor. Ah, there we are. Just get that out of harm's way, because I know these go everywhere. Ooh. There we go, put that in the bin. Right. Here we go. Excellent. That's our replacement Nixie tube. Oh, look at that. So the original was has a date code of 0883 on it. Our replacement is actually 0983. Same manufacturer. So that is basically, that's as good as we can get as a replacement for this one. The problem we've got, however, is I can't just plug that in there. That's not going to work. The company that made these Nixie clocks actually adapted. If you've watched the previous videos, you'll see me explain about this. They basically made this little board, which they've soldered on to the bottom of the Nixie tube. So what I'm going to have to do before we can actually test this and try this in the clock is to basically, we've got to desolder that little board there, clean it up, then prep the pins on the new Nixie tube there. We'll have to, we can't just solder straight to those. They were never ever really intended to be soldered to. So we'll have to polish them up so we can get a really good contact, plenty of flux, and we should get a good solder contact to them. I have done it in the past and got it to work. The problem is you can't heat them up too much, because you risk stressing the actual seal there. You could risk cracking the seal if you get the pin too hot. So it is it's a bit of a tricky thing, this, but we'll do that. But before that, what we need to do is get this board off the old Nixie tube. So I'll get set up, I'll get you zoomed in, and we can have a look at getting this off there and getting that new tube onto this, and then we can actually test it in the clock. So back in a sec. Right, okay, I've got basically just a roll of insulation tape. I'm going to use that to stop the Nixie basically just rolling around. This should make it easier for me to desolder this. Now I've got two options really. First thing I'm going to try just with a solder sucker. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to use my manual one because my desolder station's actually playing up at the moment. I need to do some work on it. I think the pump's gone because it's making noise, but I'm getting no suction through from it. So I'm going to have to investigate that. But we do have a manual one here. I've got everything set up. Got some bits of solder and what have you, so if I need to reflow them I can. We'll try that first. If that doesn't work, we will perhaps try taking it off with some hot air. But like I said, the first thing the problem with doing it with hot air is I risk melting these three connectors there, and they would be rather, I suppose what I could do, but I didn't really want to because I wanted to have a play with this faulty Nixie. What I could possibly do is take a Dremel and cut through the legs on that side there. Then I could desolder possibly those, and then I could use hot air to get the rest of. I don't. To be honest, if I cut through all those with a Dremel, I probably would have no problem. I could just heat each pin up and just push them out one at a time. So we do have a few options to go with. That's the last resort, because I wouldn't mind having a play, possibly with that faulty Nixie, and see what's what with it. We'll try with the soldering first, see how well this is going to work. And what I've done, I've actually gone up on my soldering iron tips. This is quite a big tip. I've got the iron crank right up temperature wise, because we want to be able to have quite a high thermal mass here, and see whether that's going to allow us to quickly desolder these pins. Let's try with the first one. We'll warm it up. Actually, that's worked. That worked quite well. Let's try another one. Again, yeah. They've used really big holes here for each pin. I'll show you once I've got the board out, but let's see if we can get this. No. What I might have to do, the problem I've got is, you can see it's not quite holding in there. I wonder if I can just wedge something. An old obviously I don't want to do anything that I could risk damaging the that'll work. See, that won't move as much now, so I can perhaps get in there and try that pin again. Yeah, got it that time. And that one. And that, oh. I think we've got about half of it off that one. There's so much actual solder in each hole. Like I said, the size of the holes they've drilled in the PCB for these pins is a bit OTT really. You'll see once I've got this out. It might actually make it quite tricky to get the new one in, but never mind, we'll figure something out. Oops, kneel it. Got most of it. A bit of excess off there. Yeah, this should come off fairly easily. Right, I think we might have to go over a few more a second time, but that's most of them cleared. Got one up there that we might have to readdress, but oh, hang on. That's most of the board free. I can actually whittle it. I think it's just that one at the top there. Let's try warming that up. There we go. That's the board off. Now we are going to have to do a little bit of clean-up work. There's the faulty Nixie. In fact, the solder is barely even taken to those pins, really. I'll put that to one side. And that's what I mean about the board. Can you see how large the actual through holes that the Nixie's soldered to? They really are quite large, far larger than they need to be. I wonder why they've done it that way. All we need to do now is just clear some of these holes out, and we'll clean this board up, and we can look at putting the new Nixie on it. Oops. Let's clear it. Oops. There we go. Clean that out a bit. There we go. That doesn't look too bad. We'll have a little bit of a clean up on this side. Some excess bits of solder we could do with getting off, but that's really not too bad. We'll give that board a little bit of a clean before we go any further. Just get the worst of the solder residue and the flux residue off it. Okay, there we go. That's not bad at all, actually. That will definitely work again. Let's quickly find the Q-tip. Oops. Get one out of the packet and then instantly drop it on the floor. There we go. Right, I'll give that a quick going over. And get rid of all the old flux residue. There you go. Look. Yeah, that'll go again quite nicely now. A little bit of muck in there I could do with getting off, but I should do. Right. And that side looks nice and clean. Now we've got the new Nixie here, and what we need to do, just bear with me a sec, I'll just find a very fine file, so back in a sec. Right, okay, I've got myself a very fine little file here, and all I'm going to do is just ever so gently, just where we're going to be soldering to, on each pin, I'm just going to clean the very edges of the pin up with this file, because they've like got a plating on them, and that plating really doesn't like basically it oxidizes ever so slightly on the outside, and solder really won't take to it very well. All we need to do is give it ever such a gentle little rubbing over like this. That should be all it needs. I suppose what we could do, we could just go on the inside and give the inside a little bit of a clean up as well. Because I did notice on the when they'd done it previously on the old tube, it hadn't really taken all that well. I mean, obviously it had taken enough to make a contact, but those pins come out very clean with not a lot of solder on them. So this will just, like I said, this will just help, and we will use we'll use some solder, some flux while we put these back on as well. In fact, this has got a couple of bent pins on it. Just very gently straighten those out. We'll get the base. We'll make sure we've got it in the right place, which is there. Put the base through. We have to basically make sure it's really nicely lined up, or else the tube's going to sit odd in the actual. Right, that's looking pretty good there. That's looking about. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just pull one of the other Nixies out so we can compare them. And that's looking about right. I've got about the same depth there between the pins on that one as I have on the new one here. So pop that back in there. I'll wait till I do it after. Actually, I don't want to risk shorting anything. Right. So we'll put that back down like that so we can see what we're doing. I'll get you, perhaps see if I can get you zoomed in a little bit more. Hopefully you can see that and it's going to focus on it. I notice this camera doesn't focus quite as well as my old one did. And we will use a bit of little bit of flux, and we're just going to add a tiny touch of flux, simply because, like I said, these pins aren't the best at actually connecting. I have soldered to valve pins before, so this is from past experience. There we go. Got a bit of flux on each one. Obviously, you've also got a flux actually in the solder, and I'm actually using quite a thick core solder here, rather than the really thin stuff I'm normally using when I'm working on you know, old computers and what have you. I usually use quite a thin solder. This is much thicker. This is more what I use when I'm working point to point on valve radios and what have you. But we will. That's the first one. There we go. You don't want to dwell on the pin for too long, as quick as you can really. There we go. So what we don't want to do is overheat the pin and risk cracking the glass, because then that's game over for that Nixie, and I'll have to get another one for the poor chap. That's one done. That's that one done. You have to keep just twisting it like that so I can get in and not actually melt one of these pin headers. There we go. I think I've got one more to go. There we are. Okay, that's the new base soldered on there. I seem to have got solder to penetrate all the way through nicely. So I'll have a quick clean up of this, and we'll be right back and we can have a proper inspect of it. So back in a sec. Right, okay. Well, I've just had a good clean up of the base there, as you can see, with some IPA and the toothbrush. And it actually looks like I've got dry joints on all of those pins there. But in fact, if you turn it round and you look down there where the solder is, every single one has got a really good solid connection. So the solder has flowed down through and it has soldered each pin. So I'm quite pleased with how that's gone. We seem to have a connection on every pin that we need there. So like I said, I'm quite pleased with that. So I suppose the only thing we've got left to do is actually try this in the clock. So I'll get the clock more in position and we will give it a go. So back in a sec. Right, okay. I've actually got the top off because I just thought it'd make it easier to get this in and make sure I've got the pins all aligned. So we'll put the repaired tube in the clock. That's looking okay. Yep, that's looking. I've got that in. It is possible, you see, just to get the pins slightly out when you actually do this, but that seems alright. Everything there seems okay, so we'll plug in and we'll see if that has fixed the clock. You saw there, that's the tube lighting up. There we go. And that's now lighting up without that. I'll just get you actually over the over that. Look, that's basically now lighting up without that silly glow every time it activated that tube, which was knocking out, I think it was knocking the zeros out, weren't it? As you can see, that's now counting up. Just as bright as the other Nixies as well, which is nice. What I'll do, I'll put the clock back together now. I'll dim the lights down and you can have a proper look at it actually lit up. So back in a sec. Right, okay, hopefully the camera's making that out alright. I can't really tell on the viewfinder, unfortunately. But I'm quite pleased with that. So we've got the time showing correctly there. That is actually the tube that we've replaced right at the end there. And if you look, it's just as bright as all the others. I was a tiny little bit concerned with this being the original being a brand new tube and all these having a little bit of age to them. That might be a tiny little bit brighter. Now, generally speaking, what I've seen in the past, because these are basically neon technology, is that that would have dulled down fairly quickly and wouldn't have looked too much different to the others after perhaps a month or two of running. As it so happens, just straight out of the box, it really doesn't look that much different than any of the other Nixies that are in here. They're a really, really good match actually. There's none that are really any brighter than any others. Best thing to look is that basically when you see the same digit on one of these as on that and they look exactly the same, you know it's a pretty good match. You look, the 8 there compared with the 8 there, so watch that come back round to its 8. 6, 7, there it's just as bright. So I'm quite pleased with that repair, to be honest. These tubes are still fairly easy to obtain. There are a lot in the Ukraine, and apparently from people I've spoken to, you still can get things in and out of the Ukraine at the moment. They seem to have held the like postage lines open, so it may be worth. These are a lot more expensive in the UK. You can get them a fair bit cheaper over there. Problem is, you don't know on the quality. They do have a tendency to take old, worn-out stuff and sell it as new old stock. I have been bitten by that in the past, unfortunately. As well, like I said, this come from a known, came from a known UK supplier, which I've trusted in the past. And yeah, he sold me exactly what it should have been. The only problem being, obviously, when you get these, they are just the standard Nixie, and to use them in a clock like this, you do have to swap that base over. What could possibly be done if you wanted to keep one of these clocks going really, really long time is they actually do sell the proper bases for these Nixies. And the clock could be modified, that basically what you'd do is you'd take all the Nixies off them PCBs, you'd fit a Nixie socket to the PCB and then hardwire that PCB to the back of the clock, and then you'd have standard Nixie sockets where you could use the cheaper tubes that you can get hold of. It's a possibility if they want to use this thing really, really long term as a conversion you could do. Because I believe I did have a look on a few places, and he did share a link to an Amazon site. But those actual modules modified, which is basically this this Nixie with that PCB already soldered onto the bottom of them, they're no longer available. You used to be able to buy those as a spare part for this clock, and other clocks that from the same manufacturer that basically use that these modules. They are no longer available, or they're not currently available. So your real only option is to get the Nixie like I've done and swap the base over, or convert the entire clock just to use the proper Nixie bases these were intended to be used for. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for now. So this was just a final finishing update video on this project. So that's the Sega arcade stick, the Amstrad CPC464, and now the Nixie Clock. All completely finished, and I can finally send these back to the poor chap who I'm sure is wanting his stuff back by now. I was planning to have this out last week, but also unfortunately I was not good at all last week. I was not in any fit state to start doing that kind of soldering and stuff like that, so I had to wait till I've started feeling a little bit better. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for now. I hope you enjoyed this little update on the project. So thanks for watching and goodbye.